This is my first Christian boyfriend, and we got into this argument about the Sabbath day. And I was like, Sunday's the Sabbath day. And he was like, no, it's not, it's Saturday, and all these different things. So it took me on a rabbit trail to study the Sabbath for myself. And what I found out is that indeed it is Saturday, but it wasn't just that. It was the practice of putting aside work, because I'm prone to being a workaholic, putting aside that to simply just rest and be in God with no guilt. No guilt. So since being in a relationship with him, and I'm so thankful that we got in a relationship and got out, praise God. But coming to that revelation, I implemented Sabbathing every single week. And so for me, that is how I keep my sanity. Because if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a mom, if you do all the things, it's so easy to always be on the go. But every single Saturday, I am turning it off. Like, I'm over it. I'll put it down. I'll put work away, and I don't feel guilty about that.
Thank you for tuning in to the Redefining YEW podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mrs. Kiara Mason. She and I will be talking about the balancing act of doing all things well. This is an episode you don't want to miss. Let's get started. Hey, you. Welcome back to the Redefining YEW podcast. It's your host, Lyndria Wynn, and we are back for episode number 5. Get excited because we've been consistent all season. I'm not sure where she is in relation on your screen to the left or to the right, but as you see, we have a lovely guest, and we're going to get into the formal introduction. But before we do, if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. There's a reason that you're here on this particular podcast, and only the Lord knows what you're going to get from it. All right. But if you're here for the first time, announce yourself, drop who you are. Welcome. We're happy to have you. Welcome. If this is, a recurring thing for you and you haven't yet committed to the Fam Bam, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, go ahead and subscribe there as well. But yeah, let's get into this, because today I am joined by the lovely Miss Kiara J. Mason. Hey.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course. So let me tell you, when I was preparing, Lord, who is it that we're going to be interviewing on this season of the podcast, you were one of the ones that he said is her. And y'all gonna find out in a minute why it's her. All right, so let me get into the formalities. Who is Kiara? Okay, so she is the co-owner of Made to Maximize, which is a full service social media marketing firm. And she co-owns it with her husband. Come on, purpose partners.
Yes, ma'am.
Literally purpose partners. But she is a wife, so fellas, I'm sorry, she's happily married, off the table. Yes, absolutely. But she is also a mama of 2 of the cutest kids you will ever see. Miss River Lee and Levi Arrow. Get this. So anyone who's been a part of the Fam Bam, we have Levi's, right? Not only do we have Levi's, but Levi A's. So shout out to
I didn't know yours was a Levi A.
Levi Ahmad. Yes.
That is so sweet.
And I tell her, anytime I see him in the stories, he reminds me of my Levi. I'm like, what is it with these little ones? But oh my goodness. But yes, we both have Levi A's, but there's 2 of the cutest little kids you will meet. Mm-hmm. But not only that, this recent season has been full of transition for her, and she'll get into some of the details, but she is actually the communications director over at the Transformation Church underneath the leadership of Pastor Michael Todd. So thank you, Kiara, because I done said a whole mouthful. All these hats that you are wearing so graciously. So we're going to get into it, okay?
Yes, let's get into it. I'm excited.
The title of this podcast is actually Doing It All, very literally. So that's why she's here. Because all those things that I just mentioned, that's a lot to be doing. So help me understand, because that's a lot of hats to wear. And let me back up a little bit. How do I know Kiara? So we met back in 2010, right?
Wow.
2010?
Yeah.
in the UCF Gospel and Cultural Choir. We done met some people. We done had some people come through that choir, okay? And I'm gonna tell y'all, so Kiara was the lazy soprano. She was in the alto section, but she was supposed to be over there with us.
Don't do me. I got converted later.
She is a whole songbird. She's a whole songbird. Well, a worshiper, because you did some liturgical dance as well, right?
You know, for the Lord, just little, just a little.
Little bit of everything. So all those hats, all those gifts, because that's genuinely what they are, they're gifts.
Mm.
When was the first time that you kind of realized that you were a different breed? Because you were given all these different gifts. Like, when did you realize that you were one of those ones that could literally do anything?
That is a great question, man. I don't even know when exactly it was. I just always knew that I was different. I knew that even before I gave my life to Christ, I knew that something was different about me because I couldn't get away with everything else that my friends were doing. Like, they could be out partying, sneaking, lying. I'm the one that always got caught. So I'm like, but God, like, what do you mean? I feel like I'm pretty good at this. Now, granted, there are some things by the grace of God is still covered, but it was just like, man, there is something different about me, and I knew that. But it wasn't until I gave my life to Christ where I really allowed myself to really delve into like all of Kiara. And I think just growing up, because I was the first child on both sides of the family, the first grandchild, that people naturally put you on a pedestal. But a lot of times you don't really explore who you are because you're so busy just trying to be great within itself. But I think when I came to Christ, I was like, wow, I can sing. Let's do this. Wow, I can encourage people. Let's do this. I can do those things. And when I came to Christ, I took those limits off and I just allowed myself to be whatever God wanted me to be in that season. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's so important that you said that, because I'm the baby of the baby of the baby. I'm the baby girl. My mom's the baby girl. My grandmother's the baby girl, and my great grandmother's the baby girl. So quite literally, I'm the baby of the baby of the baby of the baby.
Wow.
And I kind of got away with being the baby, like of everyone's baby, but there's another level of responsibility that I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I want that level of responsibility or pressure of being the first on both sides. My Caleb in this generation is the first grandchild for my mother and the first living grandchild for Julie's parents as well. And I noticed something. He's my little prophet. And I tell him that all the time because he's a dreamer and he has a he's very intellectual and he's very spiritually strong. Like, he's very aware of things that's going on and he can feel things. So, and I tell him, I'm like, you're a lot different than Levi. And it not because you're the oldest, not because you were first, but because there's something that you're carrying that your brother just haven't cultivated, or maybe that's just not his call.
Right.
But it's interesting that you say that, because as now a parent, I am, being a woman of faith, I can identify when things are different about my children. So that's really, really important. So y'all, she is a native Floridian, Duval County.
Duval, I gotta throw it up every time.
All day. So I know that you said that you gave your life to Christ. So during your upbringing, was church or faith not a big part of your life growing up? Or like, when did you give your life to Christ and what was that experience like?
Yeah, great question. I was not raised in church, but I had family members who, if I spent the night over their house, I had to have my church clothes ready and we had to go to church, and I hated it. Like, I hated it. Like, I didn't want to talk to the churchy people. I didn't know where the Bible verses were. Like, I didn't get the Christianese. I just didn't, because I didn't go consistently. But just about every time I went to church, there was this compelling. And I always gave my life to Christ. I always ended up at the altar, but I never knew what to do afterwards. So it wasn't until I went to this CeCe Winans concert in 2007, Always Sisters concert. I was 17, and that was my first time where I experienced the presence of God for myself, and I lifted my hands in worship for the first time. Nobody else had to coach me into it. I experienced him for myself. And from that moment on, I dibbled back into whatever I was doing, but it really was at the age of 18 when I got assigned to a summer camp. It was at a church. And I did the summer lunch program. And I so hated the fact that they assigned me to a church because I just didn't like church people. I just thought they were very judgmental and I didn't want to be around them. But someone invited me to a choir concert. And I was like, whoa, this experience, like I remember this in 2007, but that experience made me want to pray for my family. Like it pulled out an intercessor in me. And I was like hooked. I was hooked on God. I wanted to experience his presence all the time. I wanted to pray all the time. And so that was the pivotal moment for me. A month before I came to college is when I truly dedicated my life to God.
Wow. Polar opposite upbringing, but I can distinctively remember in 2010 when I met you, I knew there was something different about you. And I'm all of 18, but I'm like, she's for real about hers. I don't know what it is. And I grew up in the church. Like I knew church, but I didn't know Jesus until several years ago. Like I'm just being honest with you. I didn't understand the power that I was and the authority that I was able to walk in, what truly a calling was. There's a difference between, pastoring and ministering and just understanding the gifts and how to operate in those things. And I didn't understand those things until I was a whole parent out here.
Really?
Yes. Being born and raised in the church. So that alone lets you know that we're learning church, we're learning tradition, but many times we didn't learn who Jesus was for real. We had always known, we'd already always seen, the effects of Jesus, what we thought was the effects of Jesus in church, but we may not see it exercised. That same Jesus that caused you to lift your hand and caused you to rip and run across the sanctuary, that's the same Jesus that's supposed to hold your tongue when you were out there with your cousins. But I did not necessarily experience him in that way. He was very segmented, very much so segmented in my life. It wasn't until I became a parent and I really went through my own like Lodabar season, just very, very dark, very low, very depressed. Actually, after I had Levi, I went through this period of like postpartum depression, this very dark period. And I knew of Jesus, but that's when I really cultivated that desire and that burning and that passion for Jesus is after that period of, being a parent, being a wife for a couple of years and just going through my own little trials and tribulations. So it's so interesting, where you are now and where you are when I met you, and I'm sure you've gone through your own, bouts, hills and valleys, but at the end of the day, you've been consistent. You've been one of those ones that I can look at you and say, she's been consistent in her walk. And I don't have to know everything, but it's been one of those things where people can look to you. And that's so important because your light, Kiara, it is something about the light that you carry. Like it's literally guiding for people. Like they gravitate towards you. And it's not just the church people, it's the unchurched as well. Like they can relate to you because there are some people that you're going to reach that I would never be able to because I had the confined church growing up. I wasn't out there at the teen club on Friday and Saturday night. That just wasn't me. I was at Vacation Bible School.
Right.
So I don't know what you're talking about. I can't relate. We're not the same. I'm genuinely a church kid, but again, I did not know Jesus for real, not the church colloquialisms, but the real Jesus until a little later in life.
Wow.
It's a little later in life. Yeah. All right. So let's get into these hats. So you go through this process, you've accepted Christ into your life. You are now learning that, oh, I can sing. Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can do that. You started in the social work field. I remember when I think you were engaged to Jared at this point. You were either married or getting married because I ran into you and I think in like the health and science building or something like that on campus. And you were saying that you were entering into your master's program. So y'all, she has a whole degree in social work. So Kiara, tell us about that transition, because again, that's that's a whole thing. It feels different, like a huge shift and a huge transition. But I know, just watching your content and things like that, that you talk about how they're intermingled in the same way. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so when I was in college, I knew that I wanted to help people. So naturally, I was like, okay, I should be a counselor. Went through psychology, took biology. I was like, I hate science. But maybe I can do psychology. And then I kept asking the Lord, like, God, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? And he said to empower women. And I'm like, you got something else for me? Because I don't really like women like that. But you got something else for me? He was like, no, I said what I said. Also, I want you to be a social worker. And I was like, I don't even know what a social worker is. So he literally like put social workers in my path, and I discovered it, and I love the philosophy of it because it wasn't just like a person is based on what they think alone. Social work really looks at your environment, your relationships, your history, your biopsychosocial, all of those different things. And I was like, I can get with this. And so I went through the path of being a social worker, went and helped family and children. I was at 4C, and then I was a school social worker for elementary school kids, high school kids, and then I had a River. And I knew that I did not want to work after that. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to just really focus on my family, until I recognized I didn't like that either. I was like, I ain't cut out for this life. Nope.
Just said a whole word. I was like, woo, woo. I love my babies, but I enjoy being able to miss them during the day. I need to be able to miss you because I'm overstimulated. I'm okay. You have to go sit down.
Overstimulated, exactly. And it's not for everyone, but for the women that it is, it's beautiful, and I love that, and I admire them. But it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But I lasted a whole 15 months, and it was great. And then essentially, God ended us taking us on this radical journey where we went from being YouTubers. Then he told us to start a marketing agency. I was a social worker. My husband was in insurance. And that just led us to serving different clients in the business sector, nonprofit sector, and eventually the saints. And I told him specifically, I was like, God, I don't want to work with the saints because they don't like to keep their word. They don't like to keep their contracts. They're the most difficult clients out of them all. I want to work with the world, okay? Because they know what they're doing.
Put me in the game, coach. Put me in the marketplace.
Period. And I'll be totally fine. So then quickly after, he sent me prophets, apostles, pastors talking about, can you help me with social media? And I'm like, God, you're so funny. I guess I just can't have my own way, and that's fine. So it just radically shifted my life. And then eventually that ended up taking me to Transformation Church.
Wow. So that's huge, because when it was like the blink of an eye, and I'm sure it took a lot of just planning and preparation, but it was like 1 minute you in Sanford and the next minute you in Tulsa.
Pretty much.
It was like, whoa. And here's the thing. So during the pandemic, the church that we were stationed in was closed because it was a denomination church. They were very strict. They're like, no, we're not having in-person service. And unfortunately, that church had not invested in the online experience or capturing an online audience. So I just wasn't watching. I was a faithful member, faithful tither of Transformation Church. You hear me?
Come on, TC Nation.
What? Listen, Pastor Michael Todd invested so much, imparted so much in me. I would say, I will tell anybody. I was just telling my best friend, I think yesterday, I said the pandemic was the best thing that could have ever happened to me spiritually. It was the best thing that could have ever happened to me spiritually, because when you are raised in the church and then you're stationed in the church, I have never been in a situation or in a ministry where I am not working. I have never been one of those dormant, sitting on a pew. I'm doing something, whether it's helping after church, whether it's mostly singing in the choir, but there's always something that I'm doing. And you can get lost in the serving. And if you aren't getting what you need because you're always pouring, it was a huge shift and a huge transition and a huge blessing for me, I would say, the pandemic, to be able to sit in my home and be a part of a worship experience that I didn't have to actively participate in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got to lift my hand and be on my couch pew versus helping to provoke that experience. And it was so refreshing. I needed that break, but it also, before, you're always at your church. You don't even think about there's other ministries and other things that are going on in the world that could be a better fit for your spirit in that moment. And I got to experience that during the pandemic. So when I learned that she went to Transformation Church, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely, that makes sense. Because I can remember when we were in college, you guys, many of you guys had gone through GFC3, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great Faith. And I can remember just so much of the growth that was taking place, like people in the choir, you're doing both. And I can remember so distinctively, like when you got married and your story and how can you just a little bit, because I just need y'all to understand the level of faith that this woman employed when it came to even her marriage and the level of intentionality around that whole courtship.
Yeah, so to make it short, one thing I've learned being at Great Faith Church was faith, like literally the epitome of walking by faith and not by sight. I had just gotten out of, I did the Miss UCF pageant and I was in a relationship. I had just broken up with what I felt like was the love of my life. And our relationship just wasn't great. Like it looked good on paper and it looked good to other people, but it wasn't great. And so probably 2 weeks after that, I met Jared at my church. And that same day, God had already told him that I was going to be his wife or whatever. So long story short, I already knew his family. His family had moved here from Chicago. He moved here from Japan. And when he got there, we ended up meeting at his family's house and we had dinner together. And then he asked me out on a date. So I was like, sure. On our first date, I know what the Lord said. And I was nervous. He was like, I feel like you have something to share with me. And I was like, I do. And he's like, I have something to share with you too. So I wrote on my phone, I think you're my husband. On his phone said, I think you're my wife. We turned around at the same time and said it to each other. And I 100% would not recommend that to any person. You better know that you heard from the Lord to do that. But on our first date, we knew that we were going to marry each other. And then probably a couple of days after that, I stopped talking to him because I was terrified. Because I was like, surely God isn't that good to me that he would allow me to meet my husband 2 weeks after I broke up with my boyfriend that I thought that I was going to marry. Like, God isn't that good to me that he would do that. So maybe I'm crazy. And so we stopped talking for an extended amount of time. We met February 2013. And so September 2013, he asked me if I still felt the same way about him. I was like, yeah, we're just friends. Like, it's too much for me. And then one of my friends, one day after church, he did not say a word to me. Now, Jared always, even throughout the time when we weren't talking, he always texted me at the right time. He always had a word for me that was like so on point. But one day after church, he did not say goodbye. And I was like, I told my friend, if he got a girlfriend, then he needs to let me know. And she said, but why? You told this man that you ain't like him. And I said, okay, leave me alone. So I go to my room because I'm frustrated. Because I'm like, God, I know what you told me in the beginning of the year that I was going to be a wife, even though I was thoroughly enjoying that was the first year I actually enjoyed my single life. And he showed me a vision of me being with my ex-boyfriend and my life was miserable. It was just worse than what our relationship was. And he showed me a vision of being with Jared and there was so much bliss and so much peace. And it was just God reconfirming that I said what I said in the beginning, that's your husband. So told Jared, I was like, do you still feel the same way? This is what God said. And he was like, I do. 3 weeks later, we're engaged. 3 weeks later, we're married.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. And that was November 2013. So we met February 2013. We got married November 2013.
Wow. After a period of like going stale, like, I don't know if this is going to be it. Wow.
Yeah. 7 months of not talking.
Wow. That's faith. And approaching 10 years.
10 years this year.
Of marriage. 10 years of marriage. Woo! Lord have mercy.
My God.
Woo! My. All right. So the different hats that you're wearing, wife, mom, communications director, business owner. I know at one point you had a whole women's ministry in the Central Florida area. Like you
my
are
nonprofit.
the mommy,
Mommy shower, yeah.
yes, the mommy shower. Like I can distinctively remember like she's doing all these different things. And what does the planning of that look like? Like how would you even segment your life to be able to successfully do all of those things?
Oh, you segment your life. This is the funny conversation I had with God, because a lot of people would ask me, like, how do you do all these things? And God specifically told me, he was like, you can't do it all, but you can be it all. And I said, okay. He said, you can be everything that I've called you to be, but you don't have to have your hands in everything. You have to multiply. You have to have a team. You have to have people who will help you and go alongside you so that you can fulfill all the things that you're called to be, but you don't have to do it all. So it may look on the outside that I'm doing it all, but I'm not alone. So with Mommy Shower, I had an amazing team. I called it my dream team. Probably like 12 ladies who were committed to the vision to help make it happen. My husband, honestly, is my number one supporter, my partner in everything. He comes alongside with me and just really encourages me in doing a lot of things. But as far as planning, it's really just, what do I discern in this season is a priority, and let's make it happen. What do I want? What are some goals that I have towards it? I'm writing them down, I'm looking at them, and I'm doing it systematically. It's not just like, oh, I randomly want to do things. No, I write it out. I look at it every single month and I make sure I'm working towards it. Everything isn't perfect. I don't always meet the quote unquote whatever, but there's always movement towards purpose. So yeah.
That's so important, because I get that question often as well. And I never thought about just being it all, because literally when you haven't found your people that have the joint vision and sharing the things with you, it can feel like you're on an island, and it can quickly and easily lead to burnout. Like I had to come to Jesus with my therapist on Monday. And she literally had me write down all the things that I do right now in this current season of my life. And I wrote 12 things on that paper. 12. And she said, you understand like where we are and how we're here. There comes a place where you have to prioritize. And there's some things that are never going to shift. Mommy, wife, those things are never going to shift. They always have to be at the top. But it's like the big rock analogy. You put all the big rocks in, and then the sand and the pebbles, you sprinkle those things in. You sprinkle those things in around it. And of course I'm like, well, the purpose things that I know God is calling me to, and know that he has me doing. I had to sit back and think about those things and how I structure my day, and how much of my day is filled with nonsense, aimless scrolling, not being on time, not being punctual. Like I really had to sit in that thing and own it. Like the call of God isn't inconveniencing me. It's not. He's not an author of confusion, so it could never add to that. He's giving me the grace to do those things. And the things that make it feel burdensome and heavy are my own things that I have to work through. Like, Dree, wake up a little bit earlier. You can't sleep through it. You have to get up. And it's good intention. Yes, you need to rest, but you know what you have on the schedule. You know what you have on the calendar. You wouldn't be so pressed if you prepared. So when I tell you, between Jesus and my therapist, we've been getting it done. Okay, we've been getting it done. So what is your evolution in your faith? What does that look like? Like, when did you feel the shift, like the flip of the switch? When did you feel it? Or was it not a win, but it was I know this is when I'm moving?
In regards to just like my personal relationship with God, or just like me physically moving?
You physically moving. Let's talk about your decision to move to Tulsa. Like, when did you know like God was calling you there? Your season in Central Florida was over for the time being.
Yeah. So We have been faithfully serving in our ministry for 11 years. And been there. I grew up, like, I feel like I became an adult and just grew up and became a mom in that ministry, so many things. But 4 years ago, I knew that it was time to transition. But my husband, who was the pastor's assistant as well, he wasn't on the same page. And so I had to submit as a wife to know that God will speak to my husband when it's time. And I didn't know what it meant. And here's the thing about transition, like, you can sense it in your spirit that it's time to go. But for me, if the Lord doesn't give me specific instructions as to go X, Y, and Z, I'm staying my butt put until he gives me instructions, unless he gives me an Abraham and say, go and not know. And that has happened in life before. But I knew specifically that wherever we were going, because of how we serve, and because of what we do and the high capacity leaders that we are, I knew that we would be connected to another leader. I just didn't know who it was. So I was like, okay, well, maybe we'll go to another church in Sanford, or maybe in Orlando. This will be weird, but I don't know. So for those 4 years, honestly, we're a strong TC Nation. So we went to church. We still serve faithfully, but TC was really like supplemental content. And I really felt like Pastor Mike was a voice of our generation, and honestly, multiple generations. Sure. So that was feeding me at the same time, while I knew that there's a shift was happening. But something shifted that same year. So 2022 is when we transitioned. But the beginning of the year, my husband's language was just different. And he was just like thinking about, like, what if we did this? And what if we moved? And what if we, and I'm like, my husband ain't never said anything like that. Okay. So God, do what you need to do. I ain't even gonna bother him. I'm gonna let him say whatever he need to say, and we're gonna let it be that. But what happened was, we were watching TC one day, and at the end, so post, they call it TC post, they said, we're hiring. So my husband looked at me and he was like, I think we should apply. And I'm like, excuse me? For multiple reasons. First of all, apply means that this could mean that we would be leaving our current ministry, right? I ain't say anything, but these are the things I'm thinking. I'm like, that means we could be leaving our ministry. Also, we're full-time entrepreneurs. What does that really mean? And so in our minds, we're like, well, TC will be a client of ours, and we'll go on an interview, but they'll just become one of our clients. Okay. Anyway, so we both applied, and this was something that was, led by my husband, and immediately they said no to him, and they said yes to me immediately. So I'm like, God, what are you doing? Because I didn't ask for this. I did not ask for this. I did not ever think in a million years, I never wanted to go to Tulsa. Like, none of that. I just love to listen to Pastor Mike, and that was just supplemental. He just seemed like a distant, right? It was just such a distant thing. It was just like, I just love this ministry and I support it, and that's it. And so then I started progressing through the just the stages of the interviews, and I'm like, God, what does this mean? And is this something that you want for me? So there was this lull where I wasn't hearing much back. And I was just like, okay, it was a very tense time of transition, because I'm like, I know that it's time to transition. I just didn't know where. But I'm thinking that you're leading me here, but they're not saying anything. So what should I do in this time? And I have decisions to make with my own nonprofit, all these different things. And I remember one particular night, well, actually it was a morning time, God said, don't give up. And I prayed down the heavens, okay? And I called forth my angels, and I put them on assignment, all these different things. And I heard back from them that night. And he was just like giving me nudges to keep going. So many prophetic words that it was time to go, and it was time to transition. Not necessarily that you need to go to Transformation Church, but that it was time to like finally be released. And so it was a long process. It took from May, but we finally got the offer letter in August, and then like 3 weeks later, we left. And my husband was in agreement, and we just went by faith with it.
Wow. Very literally by faith, and just picked up babies and all.
It was the craziest thing. I've born and raised in Florida. I've been here my entire life. I've always wanted to escape. Anytime I was rebellious in my mind, like when I wanted to leave my church, I always went to Atlanta. In my mind, I'm moving to Atlanta. That is like, I wanted to be a Spelman lady.
Of course.
That's what I was going to do. But Atlanta was not it. It actually was Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I absolutely, just listening to that, it gives me goosebumps, because I have been given many just signs of what active ministry would look like on a greater capacity than what I do right now. And doing it with my husband and what that looks like, and just our current season, and where we're just not there yet to be doing that together. So I love the fact that you acknowledge that when you got that word, it was 4 years prior to your husband getting that revelation from God, and the obedience and the submission that you employed. Like, my husband's the leader, he's a visionary from this perspective. So yeah, the Lord sent this to me and he confirmed this. But it's so interesting because what I learned about prophecy, and here's something you should know. The prophet needs to be confirming something. He comes to either confirm what you already been told or to warn many times. So if I tell you get in a car, don't just be shouting, doing cartwheels, because that's not necessarily what's going to happen. Okay. There should be some confirmation. And when he started to do those things and make those, you should apply. Did you, at that moment, did you say, oh, so Lord, this is what you was talking about? Like,
No.
now he's ready. No, that never.
No, it was just like, okay, this is weird. I knew, I was like, well, obviously there's a shift that has happened because his language changed. And the options that he would have never entertained ever in life, he's entertaining them. So I knew there was a shift, but I wasn't like, this is it. I didn't know. I was literally just like, okay, God, little by little, all right. But at the same time, knowing that it just felt really surreal. It was like, man, it's finally happening, because you never know when the moment is going to happen. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Wow. So what's your process like to stay sane in these moments of just busyness and activeness? Like what's your process to kind of woosah and stay aligned ultimately? Because that's what I keep hearing you say in all these, and everything that you've explained, it's being in total alignment with the word of God and not just picking and choosing, because you could have easily said, when you got the word that it was going to happen, the shift was going to happen, you could have spoken and said, I think this is what we need to do, and tried to veer outside of the word. But it's beautiful because you stayed in alignment. Like, you don't have to dissect God's word. He's not going to allow you to take the piece and say, okay, well, we're gonna set this one aside right now because this is what I feel. This is the word I got. Sometimes the word isn't right now. It's the word, it's the promise, but it's not right now promise. So what's your process like? What's your process like to make sure that you stay in alignment?
Yeah, you know what? Before I answer that, I want to say this to anyone who's listening. The word says that God doesn't do anything until he reveals it to his prophets first. And so I want people to understand that I do not walk in the office of a prophet, but I do have a prophetic gift, and God speaks to me. And I think a lot of times, a lot of people are so scared to think of the thought that God speaks to them, but hold on to that. But I want to say this too. Timing is so important. We received a prophetic word that we would never miss prophetic timing. So timing is very important to us. We walk in the mantle of the children of Issachar. And so we just always sense when the right time is to do certain things. And unfortunately, you be wanting it to be your own timeline, and it's not that. What I know for sure is that Transformation Church was not ready for me 4 years ago. And if I would have pushed the idea of leaving, first of all, 4 years ago, I wouldn't have even imagined to think that, oh yeah, we're going to Transformation Church. Like, no, I wasn't even a thought. My position wasn't even a thought. My department wasn't even a thought. I am leading and pioneering a new department at Transformation Church. So I just want to encourage someone who's in the wait. A lot of times you're waiting because what's next isn't ready for you. And you think it's you that's not ready, but it's them. They're not ready for you. God is going to prepare a place for you, but you have to be patient enough to wait for it. So I'll say that. Stay long. Anyway.
God. My God. Thank you.
You're welcome. But how I stay sane, something that I don't even know. We may have known each other during this time. I was dating a guy. He was a bass guitarist.
Oh, absolutely.
You know who I'm talking about. Anyway, so He was not Seventh-day Adventist. He made it very clear he was not Seventh-day Adventist. He was Church of God Seventh Day. And so we were dating. This was my first Christian boyfriend, and we got into this argument about the Sabbath day. And I was like, Sunday's the Sabbath day. And he was like, no, it's not. It's Saturday, and all these different things. So it took me on a rabbit trail to study the Sabbath for myself. And what I found out is that indeed it is Saturday, but it wasn't just that. It was the practice of putting aside work, because I'm prone to being a workaholic, putting aside that to simply just rest and be in God with no guilt. No guilt. So since being in a relationship with him, and I'm so thankful that we got in a relationship and got out, praise God. But coming to that revelation, I implemented Sabbathing every single week. And so for me, that is how I keep my sanity. Because if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a mom, if you do all the things, it's so easy to always be on the go. Yeah. But every single Saturday, I am turning it off. Like, I'm over it. I'll put it down. I'll put work away, and I don't feel guilty about that. So that's one of the ways that I stay sane. Another thing is I have a monthly massage to get all that tension out of my body. It's only $65 a month, y'all. You can invest in yourself.
Absolutely.
That's
absolutely. I certainly had me a handstone, but I relinquished it because I got a gym membership. I'm like, okay, we go pick and choose. Gotta be wise with the resources, but it's coming back.
Yes. I would say so. Those are the two biggest ways that I stay sane, and really spending time with the Lord daily as much as possible. Like, I literally cannot do this without him. And I tell him this all the time. I live for him. I am not here just to do the things and be an example for people. I don't want to be nobody's idol. I have no desire to do that. I just want to do whatever he wants me to do. And because of that, I have to stay connected to the vine. He is my sanity. And so that's really how I stay sane over here.
My. You know what? We are going to, that's a perfect time. Thank you for that. We are going to actually transition into the redefining moment. So, as you know, this season was something different. And when I did the first season of the podcast, my redefining moment was just something that God had revealed to me during my quiet time, during prayer time, during, my alone time. And then I hear him saying something, and that's what I would share. But it was this season was very, very different for me. Even the level of preparation that I did for it, I would have never thought that it required this much. I'm being matured in a way that I am honestly uncomfortable with many days. And it's also pushing me to a new level of excellence, because God is not a mediocre God. And anything that he does well. He does well. And when I sat back and I really thought about this episode and why the title and why, this particular episode and why you, and it's because God is a planner. Like he had the capacity to make the entire world just like this, but he intentionally, step by step, day by day, he segmented it so the next would be in perfect alignment with the next. Like, he was so intentional in his planning. So the scripture that he actually gave me was Proverbs. And anyone who's like a Bible scholar, I am not. Okay, I'm growing in my faith every single day. I don't know when I'll ever be a Bible scholar, so I'm always going to read it. Proverbs chapter 16, and actually Proverbs chapter 16 had a couple of those little glimpses of God about planning and how he views it. Chapter 16, verse 3 and verse 9. I'm going to read it, and I'm reading from the ESV version, and it says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans." And then verse 9 says, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." And when I really thought about that thing, I'm like, everything that he's calling me to, everything that he's calling us to, we can't, like you said, you have to be those things. You can be everything. And I have been telling myself and telling anybody that will listen that I am in a season where I want to operate in the fullness of God. where I lack nothing, where I'm not picking and choosing, because God didn't say that I had to pick and choose. Like he's not a God of sparing resources. He has it all, and he wants to give it all to us. And he wants to give it all to us when we're ready to have it, of course. And when I really started to dissect how I look at my purpose and the things that I know that he's calling me to, the plans that I make, he's requiring me in this season to be very intentional about including him in everything. Like even something as small as what some people would say, oh, what you doing listening to church music during your workout? You can turn your Beyonce on. I'm like, that's this temple that I'm trying to get in alignment with what the word says. My temple been out of alignment for a long time. So if God is telling me that he's requiring my temple to be in alignment so that he can push me and propel me forward, because if my temple it don't have the capacity to do what it needs to do in this next season, like that's a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
That's a spiritual thing. So the very thing that you wouldn't even think about, God is making sure that he's inserted in every single aspect of my life. And at first it felt foreign. It felt foreign, but it feels right. And I can't explain it any other way. Like I know it's not me. It's not a me thing. The level of discipline that I am acquiring in the season is not a me thing, because like I said, I have to make myself get up in the morning. I have to make myself not procrastinate. So it's not a me thing. The level of discipline, the level of planning, the level of anticipating the next thing and being a good steward of my time and my resources is not a me thing. That's not my flesh. And that's why it feels foreign, because I typically would operate from my flesh standpoint. But when I'm doing the things outside of my flesh and I'm operating from a spiritual space, it's when I know I'm walking in alignment. When I know. You want anything to add on? Anything to say about this particular scripture? Is there a verse or a scripture that you kind of go back to when you are in your planning season?
Funny enough, that's actually one of my favorite scriptures. Proverbs 16:3, but in the King James Version. So it basically says like, commit your plans to the Lord and he'll establish your thoughts in them. And I think that is so important, because as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And a lot of times we don't recognize how much our thoughts really guide our lives. And a lot of times I'm like, God, I'm making this plan, but help me think how you would think towards this. Meaning, if this is not what you want, change my mind about it. Make me think that this doesn't sound right. This isn't the way I should go. Like literally establish my thoughts in this. If this is something that you want me to continue in, fortify my faith in it. So I definitely love that scripture. And I use that, and at the same time, just knowing that my life is for the glory of God. And so I can have all these ideas, because one thing that he made us just like him. So we are creators as well. We can literally create anything. And I tell my clients this all the time: as entrepreneurs, we literally get to create the life that we want. But with that autonomy, you have to submit it to the Lord. Because it's like, you can create this whole big whatever, and then you grow to find out that I never really wanted this life. Like I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. In my mind, that was a plan that I had. When I get pregnant, I'm not going back to work, because in my mind, I have a plan to be a stay-at-home mom. And I found out that, God, this is not me. And he told me that you have purpose outside of the home as much as you do inside the home. He established my thoughts in the fact that it's okay. Free yourself from the plan that you created. I didn't necessarily create that plan. I'm gonna use it, but I didn't necessarily create that. And so just really submitting your plans and knowing that it's okay, and God's plans will always be greater. And it sounds cliche, but I promise you, God's plans for you are always greater than anything you can ever craft yourself.
That is so good. That is so good. Kiara, I just have to thank you for being here, for spending time with me this evening. I promise her we ain't gonna be here all night. She's got babies. She's on another time zone, and it's a little earlier. They're awake. Mine are fast asleep, but her babies are still up. So thank you for your sacrifice of being here. All right. So Kiara, thank you so much. So much for being here. Thank you for that sacrifice, because you just got off a plane not too long ago, but you are here and you gave us so much good stuff. So much, so much, so much good stuff. Do me a favor and let them know where they can find you.
Yes. So, y'all, I'm most active on my Instagram stories. That is where I live. So, follow me at Kiara J Mason. That's at KIARAJMASON. If you're interested in learning more about my business, feel free to go to madetomaximize.com. And if you are a mommy who's just in need of postpartum support, you can go to mommyshowerinc.org.
Yes. Yes, y'all. So please do yourself a solid, because yes, she do be in them stories and she be dropping gems, okay? She be dropping gems. So make sure you follow her. She's not a shy person. She says she's an introvert, but I don't necessarily know. She peoples well.
I do. Now, I people with people
Peoples
I like,
well.
but then I need to recharge. I got to recharge.
She's the extroverted introvert.
Yes.
Put it like that. But thank you again for being here. Go be mommy. Go do everything that you need to do for those littles. This is episode number 5, y'all. Next episode, we are going to go even higher. So thanks for tuning in. Do yourself a solid. If this is your first time, make sure you come back, resubscribe to the channel. Come on back. We want to see you part of the fam bam. Until next time, folks. Bye.